Welcome everybody to Motherhood, Raw, Full But True, with me, your host, Rainbow Goddess. This podcast offers candid portrayals of the reality of mothering in a Western, individualistic, patriarchal culture. So welcome everybody to Motherhood, Raw, Full But True, episode 5. I'm here, your host, Rainbow Goddess, with 3 amazing women that are going to speak to you from different categories of mothering. And this isn't all of the categories of mothering. There are many with complex, intricate differences. And this one, we're focusing on lone, solo, and single mums. So just to define that, what we mean by that is single mum is a woman who's had children with a partner, and then after relationship breakdown, the partners have split up, and then the mum's with the children, but she does co-parenting. So there's shared parental responsibility and some financial support. A lone mum, in this instance, we're referring to a mother that's had children with her ex who's abandoned the situation. So not being involved in the raising of the child financially or physically. And then a solo mother we're defining as a woman who wants to have a baby, isn't in relationship, and then decides to work with these amazing systems and technologies we have to become pregnant. So we've got Alex, who's our solo mama through IVF. We've got Jackie, who's our lone mama, and Amber, who's representing our single mamas. So welcoming you, beautiful, amazing women. And first we'll come to introduce everybody to the listeners. But first, I just want to share where this came from. So this idea of lone, single, and solo mums and needing to understand the differences came from a conversation I had with my friend Jackie at Butterfield Festival in summer last year. And this podcast, this wanting to share my raw full but true of motherhood had been in me for a long time. I used to take videos with my baby when he were really young about how awful it was getting him dressed, and I'd have these shares to my phone in the morning about how hard the night was, and I somewhere in me wanted to just share it with the world, but it wasn't ripe enough until I had this conversation with Jackie where I was going on about my research I'd done and banging on about the woes of single mums, and she went, hang on a minute, single mums get some space. They get some space. They get out. There's some mums out there, lone mums who've, like I said, been abandoned, and they get no space 24/7, 7 days a week, 365, and they're not getting any financial help either because the paternal figure has abandoned the situation. So that really, deepened me into my integrity, expanded my awareness, my conscientiousness about all these other shades of single mums, and really put a rocket, inside me to make this podcast. And then that's when I started doing it from then. So I'm really grateful for that conversation, Jackie. And it's really, really amazing to have you here and feel it come circle, and to finally give you this opportunity to speak so passionately like you did with me last summer, and for our listeners to hear it. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you guys. I just want to quickly go around and introduce yourself, say a bit about your situation and why you're here for our listeners to get to know you. So where are you from, Jackie?
Oh, hi there. My son's grown up now, but all his life I've been a lone mum. I nearly said single, but lone parent, and not out of choice. And I think that was one of the things that I found most crippling, really, was the fact that it wasn't out of choice that happened. He was a planned child. The father abandoned. Didn't support emotionally, didn't support with his time, didn't support in any other way, no family around. So you create your own support network with others, single or lone parents or otherwise, and you do swapsies with other people with kids so that you get a bit of space. But generally speaking, it's full on 24/7, 365 days a year, and it's really, really tiring. And not only that, you're going through a bereavement, an emotional bereavement, and you've got to be at your strongest, and you've got to do your best, And sometimes maybe you feel like you're not doing your best because you're emotionally crippled by the intensity of the situation. So yeah, it's been a hard ride, and I remember one of my friends I used to do swapsies with used to moan a lot about how the father had not picked the kids up on time, and she was doing the single parenting thing, and he'd been late and she couldn't get off to the gig, and in it, and he went with him every other weekend, and I just lost the plot with her and said, when you do it like I do it, then you can moan at me. And I felt quite passionate about that. And I just think it needs to be recognized that, it's a tough job parenting on its own anyway, for all concerned. And doing it on your own is the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. And we'll talk later about the benefits of that because there's a lot of growth in that. But the reason I'm here is because I want to have a voice. And yes, you know, the passion that I felt from our conversation, it's still there in me, and I want to be heard, and I want other people that are in my situation to feel like they're not on their own. You're not the only person that's doing it like that, and there are ways that we can connect with each other and help each other out, and there's ways through it. But yeah, it's a tough ride, and it's great to have all these different female voices because women aren't heard enough pro se, pro rata. So, let's get it on, girls. And that's my bit for now. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for asking me.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I really appreciate it. Good to have you here. Let's hear from you, Alex.
Hiya, I'm Alex. Thanks for having me here. I actually feel like I relate quite a bit to some of the things you're saying, Jackie, but I'm different because I'm solo mum by choice, and it was my choice to have a child on my own. Got my 2-year-old boy, and I'm really happy that I've made that decision to do it on my own. But it was a long journey to come to like making that decision. Like I knew I always wanted to be a mum. It's always been really important to me, just known it for really, forever really. And in my 30, like had relationships all through my 20s. Then in my 30s found myself single and was dating different people and stuff. Ended another relationship, ended up thinking, I'm going to go and just get my fertility checked because I want to find out like if I've got a lot of time left. I think I was 34 at the time. How like if I need to be worried, just thinking, oh, I'll just go and it'll be fine. And then I can just carry on dating for a few more years. But then I went, and it wasn't great like what they said. They said I needed to have a baby within 6 months, and I was like, well, how am I going to meet someone and just have a baby in 6 months? I was like, that didn't feel like a realistic option for me. So I was like went through a whole grieving process of getting my head around the fact that my fertility was not like what I thought it was, and that I needed to think of what I was doing. And I just went on this really deep like dive around research and reading and meeting people, and just starting to permeate this idea of like having a baby on my own. And actually, I live in Bristol, and there's like 2 other solo mums by choice on my street, so I was able to go and like meet a couple of local moms, like listening to podcasts, read some books and stuff. And it was just this idea that was in the back of my mind, and I'd sort of come to the I don't know, decision that it was okay. It took me like I probably did that for about 2 years. Then I got in another relationship, and I was like, right, I'd actually, the day I got with this guy, I ended up was the day I bought the donor sperm. So it was a really funny day. And then I was with him, and it didn't work out, but I was with him for about a year and a half. I thought we might have a kid together, but I knew I had that like lens of like this is the main focus, like what I was looking for was for someone to have a child with, rather than really thinking into like, is this the right relationship for me? And it wasn't the right relationship for me. Anyway, it didn't work out. And yeah, ended up getting going to get pregnant the month after we broke up, and I went for IVF because there was like some queries around something to do with, like, I just wanted the best chance of it to work, like first off, because obviously it's expensive, and I just wanted it to happen really, and it did happen the first time, which is amazing because a lot of people it isn't that easy. So I was really lucky in that respect. And then yeah, that's how how I got to where I am, a little boy. And I'll share more about, obviously the struggles, maybe more about the process of like coming on that journey a bit more around some of the difficulties or some of the things that were good around it. But yeah, that's, I guess, an introduction to my situation. And it's really good to have a voice and share that, and think about a group of mums that I don't think are really, but I think it's becoming more and more common, but yeah, we're still like a real minority. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I remember you saying before we pressed record that you were here because you wanted to speak, because this category is misunderstood, perhaps misrepresented, and that you felt there was a lot of stigma around it. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear, when we talk about the difficulties and challenges, a little bit more about your experience in society. So I really appreciate you being here. I personally really intrigued by, your situation, and so I'm really, really grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Amber, last but not least, babe.
Hi, I'm Amber. I am the single parent to a little girl who is 7 and another little girl who is 4. I was single by choice. I got into a relationship really quite young. I was 19 actually when I first got with my ex-husband. And we got married quite young and then had children at 27. I had the children at 27. He was a bit older than me. And 2 years into having my second child, I kind of felt like things weren't right anymore. So it took me another 2 years to decide what I was actually going to do about it. It really took me a long time to get the courage to actually be a single parent, because all of my friends have got like partners that they're happy with, and kind of like Jackie, that you hear their woes, and you're doing this all not fully on your own, but when you have them, you're on your own. So like when, I'll go around to a friend's house and we'll be having a play date and she'll be really upset about something that, has happened, which is rightly so. But in your internal, you're kind of going, I'm doing all of this by myself. But yeah, it's really inspiring hearing so many other women's stories around like parenting and single parenting. And I just feel like having that voice for people to know that, people do it and they're not alone. At the moment, I'm in a period of feeling like I am very alone in it, because I don't really have many friends that have the same situation as me. And I've got, a really beautiful ex-husband who looks after the children part-time. And he does help financially slightly, which is good. But yeah, it's been a massive learning journey for me, as well as learning about how I am now able to mother myself. And that's been such a beautiful journey for me to come into my own. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amber. It's interesting, in the sharing before we recorded, you spoke about wanting to give people permission to leave unhappy nuclear family situations because of the mythology, this negative mythology, this stereotypy, this Disney kind of romance, young, get together, have the baby, stay happy forever. and coming
Yeah.
out of that could take a lot of courage, can't it, to burst that bubble and not be in this idolatry of how it should be. So I thought that was interesting. The other interesting thing you pointed out was um, sharing parental decisions. Now, when Alex
Mm.
and Jackie have had parental decisions because they've been completely on their own, that's something they've not had to contend with. And I'm like you, Amber, I'm in a single mothering situation. So I feel this a lot, like the nervousness, the school decisions, like I'm um, choosing to be vegetarian at the minute, moving to vegan from Easter. And I know because he's in a family of farmers, they just won't have it. So he's not allowed to be vegetarian, even if he believes in that. So there is this like conflicting values thing. So that's just one interesting difference, isn't it? That
Definitely.
these complexities make us have to, in our matrescence, you be able to tackle different things. It's like you have these like tennis rackets almost, and you have to carve out the shape for you, for your situation. But it's just so interesting, all these different layers of all the differences. But, mums are just blanketed, I think, by society. Like, we have no idea what's really going on. And so this whole deepening into the different subcategories of motherhood is this whole other can of worms. And so just really rich and really interesting and, really important, I think, that we try and understand where each other's coming from, so we can empathize, but also so we can start to build some sort of intervention packages, because one size doesn't fit all, does it?
Mm.
Like I identified in my research, single, spiritual but not religious mums as a category. But then there's so many others, like Jackie, you mentioned a few earlier, but there's black mothering, queer mothering. There's like all these different situations, isn't there? And like what you mentioned, Jackie, I think you mentioned widows who are not choosing to be lone mothers, but they're forced into it because exes have died. But yeah, it's so rich, it's so diverse, and I feel like we're only just peering in. There's a little crack of light coming in through matricentric feminism and, research and academia wanting to, get to know what's going on for mums. So I think it's a good time, and it's, really rich opportunity we've got. And I'm really glad that you're here. I really appreciate it, because time and space when you're a mum is difficult to come by, isn't it? So, what I'd like to do is, to deepen in a bit here. So, if you feel to share with us some of the challenges that are really alive for you or were really alive for you, then that'd be amazing. If anyone feels to jump straight in and just go for it.
I think the biggest challenge for me was the difference in values. We have completely different like parenting styles, and I never really knew this until we did split up, because I think when I was in a marriage, I was going down that whole societal path of you've got to get married, you've got to do this at a certain point, you've got to have children. And I didn't have a voice. I wasn't me, and it's just really interesting seeing the difference in parenting now that I've become my own, and seeing his kind of like view on it. Like you can tell that he doesn't like the way that I parent. I'm quite free flowing. I like to go abroad for 6 weeks and, camper van and just like things that he would never think he just wouldn't want to do, because he wouldn't want to put himself in that like hard position of doing that. So yeah, it's been a really interesting way to see parenting and the differences.
So you just said that when you were with him in the home, was it that you felt suppressed? You let him take
Yes,
the lead, he decided things. So
massively,
you had like a patriarchal kind of, is that
massively.
some of the reasons why you left then?
Yeah, and I think now I'm kind of coming into my own, and
Mm.
really, I suppose, coming into my spiritual side and learning about who I am. And I want that to also empower my children, so that they don't feel. I felt like I was in a cage, and I think that at many points within my life, I've grown up thinking that that was the right thing to do. Like I'm breaking that generational like cage. And it's really, really interesting to see. But even when you go into, I'm not saying that everyone is like this, but you'll go into friends' houses and you'll see their relationships being quite similar. And just the way that they parent, like it's beautiful and they're doing it as a team, but I'm kind of like coming out. I'm like this phoenix coming out like a mother phoenix. And yeah, it's been a really big challenge, kind of the backlash that I've had from that.
Can you speak a bit more about that challenging backlash?
I would say a lot of hard conversations that we've had to have. And also there's been, quite difficult. Any breakup is difficult, isn't it? And I think when children are involved, it can be really quite complicated in the sense that they're aware now. They're in their awareness that they know that mummy's left the house. And, I left the marital home because, in a sense, like I was not the person, because I'd kind of taken a back seat of my career to have my children, which looking back now, I feel like I possibly wouldn't have done. So I was the one that left the marital home because I was going to be unable to afford to live there. And that has been such a big thing for me because, I gave birth to those children in that house, and that house has a lot of sentimental value to me and the children as a family. So I was kind of forced away from that family home. And, there's been quite a lot of situations where my children have wanted us to be back together, and they've been like, why don't you live in our home anymore, mummy? I mean, I love it's so cute because they say, I love our home now, but why do we not live together? And, they've got that awareness, and it's been such an emotional roller coaster while you're also dealing with your own emotions at the same time and becoming a new, not a new human, but like, I'm coming out of this cage as well at the same time. So there's just so much going on. There's like, yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's been a wild year.
Well, thanks, Amber. Yeah, I'm feeling you there, especially around the values thing. It is so clunky when
Mm.
you've got this other person who's like even being stubborn, or like sometimes I can't even have a conversation with Dan because he gets so defensive straight away. And
Yeah,
it's like, oh,
same.
I'm not trying to attack you. I just want to speak to you to do what's best for our son, and it's really, really sticky. And then obviously like the grieving, the children they grieve for it, having to hold that space. Like I
Mm.
grew up without my dad and I remember pining for him and not really feeling like I could ask my mum much about him, but it was this thing that I wrestled with as a kid, like where is he? What does he look like? This sense of him not being there. But then with Frank, although he does have regular contact, but then I have to mop up all this grief. So I imagine I was probably easier for my mum because just wasn't there and it was just a thing. Whereas Frankel, I think it challenges me because it triggers my stuff as well. That constant cycling. I miss my daddy, and when he's upset, he'll just pull that one. I miss my daddy. When we're having an argument, I miss my daddy.
Yeah, I get
Oh,
that. I get that.
you have to be the responsible one, the boundaries one, and then the dad because he just goes at weekends and they have more of a fun time. There's none of that
Mm.
parenting. So that gets me really angry that I do a lot of the actual parenting stuff and he's the fun parent, never does doctor's appointments, never fills in any forms, and the lack of respect or value for how much of the parenting I do because we've gone halves on a kid.
You feel
You know,
inadequate, don't you? There's like you don't feel good enough. Like
mm,
that's the feeling that I get when they'll go like exactly what you were just saying. They'll go for the weekend and they'll come back to me and they'll be like, I miss daddy. Or if they're really upset, I miss daddy. And then that triggers something in me because then I'm like, I don't think you realize how much it took me to get out of that situation.
mm.
But
Oh,
like
and they
I
say
don't
daddy's
expect
the
them to.
best. They
Yeah.
say
Well,
daddy's the best.
no.
And Frank will say, I love daddy more than you. And he's not
Oh,
saying it to hurt me, but I think it
no.
comes from how much he pines for his dad. So I
Yeah.
think when he says, I love daddy more than you, it means in his chest, this feel, but I don't want him to confuse this feeling of pining for someone as love.
Mm.
but it's interesting that. And then he saw Dan speak not nice to me. And then when we came home that night, he just thought about it and totally off the subject, but we're in the bath and he was sat on the loo, which is a role reversal because usually it's the other way around. And I said, oh, I can't believe that one day you're going to be a man. And I weren't thinking about Dan at all. And then he says to me, I'll be a kind man, mummy. I won't speak to you like daddy does. And then
Oh.
after I'd got out of the bath and we were having a bit of, getting pajamas on, when they sing the little songs, they were just going, I love mummy and daddy, both the same. So it were like is he's putting his dad on a pedestal. He'd come down off the pedestal because he disrespected him for the way he spoke to me. And then he'd thought about it. And since he's actually said to Dan on the phone, completely unprompted, Daddy, I want to tell you you've not to speak bad to mummy. And he'll say to me, Mummy, will you remind me to tell? It's a lot for a little boy that to old, but I think it's good because it's teaching him empathy. It's his inherent feminism. It's his inherent empathy that we all got equal rights and we should be kind. So I think it's really hard. It's hard to hold that. So I don't know how this is for the others, but maybe you could speak to that because there isn't that far. I mean, for you, Jackie, now he's in relationship with his dad, isn't he? I heard you say that before. But yeah, that idea of, this absent father and how you dealt with it and how that was challenging. Now you're going to deal with it, Alex, when, you're going to get asked these questions, aren't you? Like, this is a big challenge, isn't it? I can imagine for both of you on top of everything else. So yeah, thank you, Amber, for that sharing. Let's hand over. Anybody else feel really moved?
I think some of that stuff that you were sharing, like breaking, I mean, this isn't to do with like dealing with the dad situation. That is another thing that I haven't like come to yet, but have given a lot of thought to. But I think some of the stuff you were saying around kind of breaking out of that mold, like taking the steps to leave your marriage and breaking out of that like expected life path. I think that was a real struggle of part of my process and is still at times processing, kind of like leaving behind that kind of heteronormative way of having a family, like man meets woman, has a baby, and letting go of that idea of actually I'm going to do something different and this is going to be like, how am I going to be about that in the world? And how am I going to deal with people's reactions? Like, that something that really got me a couple of months ago was I have been dating, and someone on a dating website I said I had had a kid on my own, and his instant reaction was, oh, that's really sad. And I was like, no, it isn't actually. And then I just completely unmatched him. But I was like, there's no curiosity there about what the story is around that. But yeah, that stigma and kind of breaking out of societal norms has probably been a real part of my struggle, my journey. Like I've gone and yeah, got support around that, like come to terms with that and stepping into like, actually, no, I'm really pleased that I have done this for myself, because I just feel like if I hadn't have taken steps to become a mother by now, like I'd be gutted. And if I would have been waiting around to meet someone at the right time that suited my body, or got with someone just to have a baby and then ended up in like a really difficult relationship, or, I know that sometimes co-parenting works out really well, but like often, there can be lots of arguments and stuff. And I didn't want to end up being stuck with someone that forever basically in my life, who I hadn't got the chance to fully get to know. So I felt like yeah, I'm really pleased, but that has definitely been like that kind of, yeah, breaking societal norms and stuff has been part of the journey and the struggle, I would say. It's helpful, I reckon, being in Bristol. I think there's definitely other parts of the country, like I'm from Suffolk, and I think I went there, stayed there in my maternity leave, and like maybe not as kind of warmly received, you know, like that stigma sort of that I mentioned earlier, just being a single parent anyway sometimes can carry a stigma, can't it? But if you have also kind of gone about this and made this decision to become a single parent, like yourself, you decided that, like, I don't know, there's definitely some kind of attitudes around that, like, what do you mean they're not going to need a dad? Or um but yeah, I feel like where I am
Can I
living
ask,
and
sorry, Alex, to interrupt, can I ask you to go a bit deeper into that? Like, how does it manifest, this judgment, stigma from society? Can you give us any examples of?
I mean, to be honest with you, I feel like I haven't had loads of negative responses in my life. I haven't. I know other people who have. Like, generally, I've had a couple of men who've said things like, "What do you mean? You just think you can do it on your own?" And I think that is like coming from probably feeling threatened in that they're being their role in that is being a bit eradicated. Um, but I haven't had too much negative, I guess. And sometimes it's hard to know in some situations, isn't it? Like, I just remember being at a play group in Suffolk and feeling like when I said I was a single mum, that there was a bit of a, cold reaction. And is that my own stuff? Am I projecting that onto that other mum? Or is that what's going on? Because I do know, like, it's a much more conservative area around there. And whereas, like I said, on my road in Bristol, I got a couple of other solo mums by choice who really close by, and in my work I've got another team member. So it feels like it's kind of more accepted and there isn't so much stigma around it. Also, I did experience some stigma within the maternity services, which was, a vulnerable time anyway, and yeah, it was a bit tricky. And I am, having been like 2.5 years on from the birth, I'm just getting to the point now where I'm going to write to the hospital and kind of try and give them some of this feedback. But yeah, within my experience in hospital, so having to spend quite a bit of time in hospital before I had my son, I just experienced a few comments from different midwives. I actually made a complaint about one when I was in the ward, because when I told her, so I was 3.5 weeks in the ward before having Ord, and I told one of the midwives that I was having a baby on my own, and her response was like, "You must be mad." And it was like, oh, no, I've thought about this quite a lot. Yeah, it was quite kind of, dismissive, I suppose, and also just as if she hadn't met other people who would be birthing alone in the hospital, which felt a bit strange, because I think that there's lots of different ways people have children now, isn't there? So I do know that, being a solo mum without a partner at all, is more unusual, but I felt like midwives should be kind of aware of that, because that felt quite dismissive. There was also some issues around the time when I was in hospital where you're only allowed to have your birth partner in the hospital, and my mum was my birth partner and she lives on the other side of the country, so that meant every time I had a visitor, I had to kind of explain my situation and talk about, why my birth partner was on the other side of the country. And after I'd done that, like about 3 or 4 times, again, I kind of had to go up to the manager of the ward and be like, I don't want to have to explain my situation to the security on the ward every day. And they did let me have different friends visit, which thank God, because, being in hospital for 3.5 weeks with no visitors would have been horrendous. But I did have a lot of different visitors come by, and that was really good. But again, it was that kind of like having to explain myself, and that not being kind of something that's usual, and having to fight for that. And then I also remember going into the birthing, like in to have the C-section, and one of the assistants in theatre, she kind of said to my mum, "Oh, we haven't got any shoes in your side," because it's usually a man that comes in with mum. And again, it was like, well, you must get some same-sex couples, or, you know, people who've had alternative birth partners. I know I'm not the only one, but I think it's like, yeah, those kind of things that we've been talking about in having to kind of fight to be different, and also, yeah, the stigma, that kind of experience of feeling really othered, feeling really different in times when you're feeling vulnerable anyway, and then having to go into that kind of like defensive position of, oh, well, actually, I'm not the only one. And yeah, that felt really hard. And I think, you know, there's a bit of I kind of feel like Bristol's quite a progressive place. But yeah, it would be great if, you know, all kind of healthcare professionals in like maternity services were really like aware of the diversity within birthing. Having a recent conversation with a friend going through like midwife appointments, and they're just all geared towards male and female partnership, all the questioning, you know, so just getting a bit more awareness of diversity would really help reduce some of that stigma. But it feels like there's quite a long way to go in maternity services. So, yeah.
Thanks for highlighting it. You know, it's important for us all, isn't it, to be more aware of, you know, we can be more sensitive to people who are doing things that are quite rare, you know, or just new emerging concepts, because technology is moving so fast, isn't it? And there's so much that we're getting our heads around. So yeah, it's good, it's healthy for us to understand and to look a bit deeper. I've got this question in me, like about because you're still in early infancy, aren't you? And you know, like everything you go through, and this applies to you as well, Jackie. Like, you know, this absolute sleep deprivation in early infancy. I found it almost killed me. The sleep deprivation, it sent me mad, you know, and I started bashing myself, and just really just the impact of that is so misunderstood. But then imagining you two like never getting a break from it, I just can't imagine how you survived that. You know, it's a wonder, it's a miracle. I think that you've survived. But
I
Alex,
think
for you chose it, and Jackie, for
yeah.
you didn't choose it. So I'm wondering about, you know, the emotions, like, because I often think, just imagine if he dies tomorrow, you know, and keep, like, sometimes when I really need, like, right, I need to show up now, I need to just be the mum. Sometimes I think, right, what if he died tomorrow? I don't have any regrets. And that motivates me to, like, just go, right, come on. So for you, I'm wondering, is it like, you know, really wanted this child so preciously, and that's what helped you endure? And then Jackie, did you just have to get to these points of like, oh my God, well, there's nobody else, so I'm just going to have to get up and do it, you know, and that like building resilience. So I'm interested to know more about them bits with you guys as well. So maybe you could have another.
I was going to say, like, you know, it was my choice, and I can't, you know, I'll be really interested to hear from you, Jackie, because I think that to be processing an unexpected loss of expecting having more help, I could imagine being so painful, because I find that is one of the other real big challenges, is when there's an expectation that you might get support or you might get help, and then it's not there. But yeah, the early days, I actually had a really difficult, I was in hospital from 30 weeks, and Auden was born at 34 weeks and was in intensive care for a couple of weeks. So I had just a really brutal third trimester and then start of his life, which I've just started to have EMDR therapy around. But I had made a lot of plans I had a doula. I had planned like that when Auden arrived, how I would manage like the first, I think I did 8 weeks. So I sort of worked out with family and friends, different people that would come and stay with us. So I wasn't on my own. I mean, it was really different because he was in intensive care and it was just going back and forth to the hospital, and I did, I kept to come home without him. But I had planned in a lot of support because I'd given it a lot of thought before he came. And then because he was in the NICU and stuff, like loads of people brought us meals, and I was really looked after by my community, friends, family, people at work. Like, it was amazing. So it's really hard to unpick it in that first bit. But and also this is another complicated factor is that when Ord was 3 months old, my dad got diagnosed with terminal cancer. So I just had to stop, like, basically all the support for me stopped because it was all on dad then, and we were driving back and forth to Suffolk. I drove 10,000 miles with Ord before he was 6 months old. Like, I was just constantly in the car. So a lot of, like, that early year, my dad died just after Ord was 1. And so when those, like, 9 months, and again, that's part of why I'm going into therapy now, is just that I had to completely put on hold kind of needs of myself. And it was brutal, really, really brutal. And I had therapy throughout that time as well, like, not, so, and I needed that, like, because there was just, like, so much in my family as well. It was really, really challenging. So when you say about, like, not getting rest and not getting sleep and the sleep deprivation and all that stuff of them being really small babies, it's confused for me around how much of that was a struggle of being a solo mum with, and then everything else that was going on around that time. Like, I couldn't cope with not knowing when he was going to fall asleep, so I just needed to, like, plan it and know that then I was going to get, like, that half an hour or 40 minutes. It was really hard, and even, like, now I do feel it's difficult for me to talk about. So yeah, but there's lots of other complicated things rather than just being solo parents. It's a bit blurry.
Wow, Alex, what a lot you've been through. I'm so sorry about your dad. Bless his soul. Maybe resting in peace, watching over you and your son. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And
He was
yeah,
absolutely, like, it was the first grandchild, and it was like he was so delighted to meet him. So yeah.
mm,
And we spent a lot of time with him and my mum in that first year. So yeah, but thanks.
beautiful. Well done. Well done for surviving that, and getting to this point now where you're breathing a bit and grounding a bit, and yeah, just keeping tackling it through these spaces to process. It's all you can do. So congratulating you and your strength, and yeah, blessing your unfolding journey. Thanks for sharing. Jackie, your turn, babe.
Yeah, wow, what a lot of, yes, the stories are just, I felt so many times there that I wanted to just sort of chip in, but I did write one or two things down. My story basically started with not thinking I was going to be able to get pregnant, going to the doctors, waiting for tests to be done, and then conceiving. But we were trying. So it was unexpected, but we were trying to have a child. So it was planned. And we bought a house together, and it all looked like it was all, full steam ahead, commitment. Here we go. Let's build a family. Let's build a home. Let's build this house and have a fantastic time together. And that was where my dream was heading. And then that dream was shattered by the realization that my ex-partner was playing away. So he was around at the birth. He was freaked out, although he was very useless, as a presence there. But he was there, and he was there up to my son being about 18 months old. And it started becoming apparent. He did the exhibition work and worked away a lot, and then started working away a lot more, and then playing away while he was working away, and that became apparent, and then eventually he left. So we went, it went from, a dream that was in my heart, and I was in love, and I was in love with my child, and I was in love with the idea of having a family that might work, which, seems like it is a very difficult task for most. I think it's, takes a special connection between people for that to go the full slog, shall we say, but whatever. And I come from a broken home, so I come from a single parent, single stroke nearly lone, because my dad just took us out on a Sunday. That was to the pictures, and I hated it because I had two brothers. So the amount of times we had to go and watch 007 movies, and I couldn't wait for it to end. Like, get me out of here. But anyway, that's another story. But yeah, so all my dreams were shattered, and I was just a bag full of emotion. And I've written some of those things down, and I'm kind of just going to recite some of this off, because this is kind of how I felt. So my freedom went from relative to none at all, as in freedom of movement to do, to be able to survive. I was restricted. I became immediately restricted. It wasn't planned for. So I felt insecure. I didn't have any money coming in. I had to go into benefits. I couldn't afford to work, even though I had a career that I was, I'm an artist, and I worked for I couldn't pursue my career. I couldn't afford to work because I couldn't afford to pay for the childcare. I didn't have the support there to do swaps and whatever, all of that. And it made me really angry. It made me angry. I felt alone, abandoned. I had to deal with anger and resentment towards this other person, whilst throwing out love and support and nourishment for my child, and trying not to be depressed, for want of a better word. So I was, emotionally drained with it all. I had no time for myself I had no family around me. And eventually he moved away, far enough away to not be able to be involved. So he ended up in London eventually. Initially, he was a part-time, I'll come on Sunday kind of dad, but then he wouldn't turn up. So I'd have a child who expected his dad to turn up, and then the dad didn't turn up. So you've got all this damaging stuff going on too, in amongst this person who's just been completely and utterly irresponsible, basically, and you're picking the pieces up and trying to pick yourself up in amongst it all. So it's hard. Now, there was a couple of things I wrote down, and, in my opinion, society doesn't frown enough on men who abandon their children. It's one thing, separation of parents, because it's not working. And I don't believe you should carry on in an unhealthy environment where there's certainly not any any amount of aggression, be it anger or otherwise, for a child to be subjected to. So I don't agree to that. So, okay, fine, split up, but both parents need to remain involved, and both parents need to remain committed and supportive towards the child and the child's needs. So when a man leaves and doesn't support, I really don't think that society is just like, oh, well, that's what men do. Oh, well, that's, so I have a big issue. I have a big issue around that. There's no shame for a man who turns his back on his kids and doesn't support the mother. Now, what I had from my ex-partner was he wouldn't give me any money. I had no financial support from me. He wouldn't do anything that was in any way showed any sort of commitment, be it time, emotion, finance, or otherwise. He just lived a life of a bachelor, came and went as he wanted. I never shut the door on him because I didn't want to be the baddie at the end of the day, and I didn't want my son to suffer. So if he wanted access to his son, then yes, the door's always open. The door is always open. So that never got shut, and that was an important issue. Another thing is that, you know, I really think that we as women are expected by everyone to do whatever, you know, the mum does. We're expected to do it. It's what, you know, everybody across the board, across society expects. That's your role as a, you know, whereas I don't think men are expected in the same way to play that parental role, which goes back to society again, and not really putting any pressure out there, you know, in any shape that would make any difference to that behavior. So those are a few things, you know, and also like who's playing the role of dad. So you're not only playing the role of mum, being the one who's supposed to be loving and caring and nurturing and all those gender titles that we get given, but also you got to play role of the disciplinarian, the dad, you know, and show them, you know, how do you do this? Well, you know, I went and did computing so that I'd be able to show my son when he in his schooling, I'd be able to help him. I did HND in computing eventually, but all part started because I knew it was going to be something that I needed to know to be able to help him with his growth through what he was going to be doing. So, you know, it's a massive tool. It's huge. It's huge. It goes beyond putting some food on the table, washing the clothes. It goes massively beyond all of that. And it's a lifetime's job, you know. It doesn't stop at 18 when they leave home. It doesn't, you know, it is for life. And your life changes when you have a child, and that's massive. And that is for the father too. Now, I remember taking my son to London for a weekend to see his dad. So I took him to his dad, and I had a conversation with his dad, and I said, you could die tomorrow, but you're still going to be a father, because nothing ever now is ever going to change that. Or he could die tomorrow and you're still going to be a father. That won't change that. Nothing on this planet now is going to change the fact that you were a father. So I'm suggesting that you get on with doing that. And that's what I did. And I kept taking Louis to see him. And I said, whatever happens, my little boy is not growing up not knowing who his daddy is. I am not having that on my shoulders. And in some ways, that's kind of backfired on me, to the point that, going back to that, you know, the benefits of maybe being solo or single, less so, but back to single, not, but solo is, you know, you make the choices. You're not having this conflict of interest, conflict of, I think we should do this or that or whatever. But what I've noticed over the years is obviously his time with his dad has been just his time with his dad that I've not been privy to. And I've seen behaviours, suggestions come through that I know are directly come as suggestions from that his paternal source, shall we say. So, but I mean, I guess that, you know, anyway, that can come from peers or otherwise, can't it? But anyway, just telltale signs where I just, sometimes I've had moments where I've thought maybe it would be, is that genetic? Or should I just not have let him have any influence whatsoever? So, you get my gist.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like his father's influenced him, and then you've seen that manifest.
Regard, yeah, but
So if he hadn't been with his dad, then you know you could have 100%. Apart from the peers, like you said, in society, you could have the main influence.
kind
That
of,
mama
yeah.
bear instinct, isn't it?
There's schooling though, isn't there? I mean, if I had a little one these days, there's no way I'd put him through our schooling system. There's no way on this planet that he or she would be going to school in this country. And there's another podcast for you.
Yeah.
No, see, that's the difference with me, because like I would love to not have my children in school, but their father is very academic. So now I'm in the position of like, I'm witnessing my children going to school. I don't like what's going on in the schooling system. I don't agree with it at all, but I've got to put on a smiley face because he like, you know, he's won't support me to be able to not put them through school, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I struggle with that. And I hold a lot of anger and resentment, like yourself, to him, because in some ways he's still restricting me from being the mother that I want to be.
Mm.
So yeah, I totally hear you.
Mm. There's two interesting things come up here. The first one I want to come back to, Jackie, is where you were speaking about the lack of pressure, with regards to paternal responsibility in society. Now you look at the figures, the statistics for the families in the UK, and 15% are single parent families. 99% of those are headed by mothers, and 50% of those mothers don't get any child maintenance from the fathers. And our government doesn't legally enforce maintenance payments anyway. Talking about time, that's not even a conversation. Paternal responsibility for emotions, parenting, time spent with the kids, care of the kids, that's not even in the conversation. It's literally a pittance through the system of the CSA, which hasn't even been upgraded to, account for the cost of living crisis either, and it's absolutely ridiculous, the standards. So it's crap. Even when it does happen, the model that's out there that these men are pitching themselves against is so ridiculous. Like when you do the calculation thing, it says that Dan should give me like £47 a week. And he earns, goodness knows, over £1,000 a week. He does building. He pays no rent because he lives on his family farm. They're tapped into the water. His main bill is Sky TV and council tax, and his van for work. But he's got no mortgage. He's going to inherit a lot of land and stuff like that. And yeah, I moved out of that home. I had to start again, get all the new furnishings. There were no carpets. I got put in a house in a town where I knew no one, far away from my family in another county, and just the fight to get him to respect and to give me a certain standard of money is a constant. Just last week, it decided that when our son goes to school, he doesn't need to pay me maintenance anymore because that means I can work in all that time. A couple of months before that, I had this whole debate about him wanting a weekend back to himself and him saying I could just work less so that I can have our son more. So it is, and when I talk in the earlier podcast, I mentioned these negative myths about motherhood. So there is this one where we believe that mothers are 100% responsible for the kids, and these things are out there in our society really causing damage. And then there's the institution of motherhood as well, which is a political and economical patriarchal concept, where because women are conditioned by this notion and they buy into these myths of how mothers should look, how they should act, how they should do it, they become economic slaves in a monetized society and do mother work free. So mums are trapped in this existential, like spiritual crisis in the matrescence because they're pretending to the outside world, and also the force by society because we care so much about our kids. We do pick up the slack. We do end up doing it because there's nobody else that will do it. So 80% of women become mothers, and then when you look at the stats in like general Western societies, this doesn't apply to Scandinavian countries, but in general Western societies that are patriarchal, the majority of mother work is done by the mother. And it's only like Andrea O'Reilly, who's this amazing researcher I bang on about all the time, who invented matricentric feminism. She speaks about Scandinavian countries having less patriarchy, more partnerist values, and so the men over there, the fathers, are doing a lot of the tending. So she says anyone can do mother work, but in these Scandinavian countries, she could actually say that the men could be called mother because they do a fair share of it. And then the second point I wanted to make when I said there's two interesting things was around what you said about the complexities of parenting. And because of this first point, we've took on this responsibility, and that's what we do. Just do that. and we care so much, we pick up the slack. So it's like what you were saying about undervaluing the little complexities that go on, like how I have to sit in Tesco's on the floor for 40 minutes because my son's crying about a magazine that his dad forgot to get him, which is also linked to the time when his dad forgot to take him to London. And his dad's got no sense of repair, no emotional capacity to sit and explain and repair with Frankel. So I've got to do all that picking up the slack. And then also thinking about his unique needs, how he wants to express himself in the world, and setting up all these like after school clubs and stuff, just nurturing his own individual personality and his own likes in the world, like all of these little concerns that we have about our kids, how it can take an hour just to get out of the house, the amount of stress it can put on your nervous system, just to get everything packed up and in the car to go to a social event so you don't go insane. All these little complexities are so vastly, drastically misunderstood by the fathers and society, and it's a shame because we're so busy doing our mothering and all these pressures of society, all the domestic stuff that never ends, the constant trap of it. It's just you don't even get a chance to have a political stance or to take a revolution because we're so busy in the mess of matrescence and trying to take care of our kids and picking up the slack of society and the slack of the, fathers. And it's interesting with your situation, Alex, because in this book, Matricentric Feminism, there is a section on mothers like you where it's like mainly white, rich women who've got the opportunity to spend all this money and all the resources to be able to do it. Because it's such a conscious thing. You have to go in knowing, all of the support. So it's interesting you're saying before how you set up this 8 weeks of support. I was thinking every new mum needs to do that. Not
Yeah.
just solo mums, like everyone needs to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I really get like I'm totally in a privileged position like that I've been able to like support myself with finances, like having a doula, like that's privilege to be able to do that. And yeah, I think some of the things you were just saying there about the struggles with kind of your exes, it's a bit of a fantasy, I suppose, but I always imagine like what it must be like to have someone else who cares as much about your kid as you. Like, I don't know, like there's another person who is as invested in them, or who might think about them with you, who like might care about some of the decisions. Like I really remember that when Ord was really little, just like deciding like, I don't know, how to get a car seat, I was like, will someone else be able to like think about how safe he's going to be? Nobody else is going to care as much as me, like that. So it's kind of a fantasy that having someone else, even if I decided to have a baby with someone else, but we weren't in a romantic relationship, because that can happen. Yeah, this idea, but then I'm hearing all these struggles that come up actually with the other person that is involved, or their viewpoints, or them having different values. And yeah, so in some ways it's like a real positive that I that I don't have that whole other emotional labor to contend with, like, you know
You have
when
all the responsibility though, don't you?
yeah, oh
So I'm not
yeah,
surprised you have this fantasy because it
yeah,
is, right from the moment you decided to do it,
yeah,
there's all the responsibilities on you.
yeah. And it is like, yeah, that felt it's getting more, I get more used to it. And he does have people in his life who care about him as much as me, like his granny and his aunties and stuff. Like my sister lives 2 doors up, so she's really involved with his life, and I've got a housemate who is really present. He's great. So yeah, he's got other people in his life, but yeah, the responsibility and the deep thinking and the reflecting on him is on me. But I don't have to deal with the fallout of someone else's shit if like they let them down, or they razz them up. So, and I think that is it's quite difficult for me to listen sometimes to other people. Like, I have a lot of friends who obviously have partners, and they will come and vent about their partners and what's gone on and stuff. And some days I can really like hear it. And I had a friend that came around the other day, and she was like, "Oh God, I shouldn't be moaning to you. Like, you do it all by yourself 24/7." And I was like, "Oh no, you need to like let it out." But sometimes it's a lot to listen to people moan about, um, or be upset about how their partner didn't cook the dinner the way they wanted them to cook the dinner, or they used a really difficult tone with their child that they didn't like, and it's like, but you you could just walk away from that situation, and you could like go for a walk around the block, you know, if you wanted to, because you would have that choice too, whereas that isn't an option really here.
Interesting, isn't it? The triggering of other people in partnership doing parenting and not, yeah, they're wanting to share it with someone. Even the good things, I find that really challenging. Like sometimes Frank will do something so amazing or so funny, and it's missed. It's just missed, and no one there to share it with. And that, like when we do good things, like we'll plan his days out, and it's never as enriching as when we go on a day out with other people, and it's just me and him on our own. Something precious about it, but something sad about it too. I feel, and that's a challenge that I deal with.
I think that witnessing of like special moments or things like I struggle with, like, oh, nobody else got to see that really funny thing that he just did. But my personal thing is I don't, yeah, I don't know, I spend a lot of time with Ord, me, him, and the dog. So I'm like, don't, yeah, I don't get that sense of sadness when we hang out with it. But yeah, there's a bit of like wondering what it would be like if someone else would witness some of the things that go on, and also witness me as a mother, like witness me doing my being a mum. Like, who gets to see that? Obviously Ord does, but like I sometimes that's been like, yeah, something I've come to terms with, like nobody's got to see me do this work, which I'm proud of, which I'd quite like somebody else to see. Maybe they will one day.
Yeah, I get that. I'm sure we can all relate to that, right? Especially in one of them super mum moments where you're just on it. Everything's organised. Everything's where you remember it's supposed to be. And, you just crack on, and then they might have a meltdown and you just navigate it really well. And then the super mega bedtime routine and you have a lovely day. Like, yeah, I think we can all relate to not being seen in that super mum archetype, because she's there and she's rocking when she comes out. Ah, thanks, Alex. Anything else coming up around challenging, and even the way society looks at you, anything that went on for you as an individual, as a woman, challenges in your maternal situation, or anything else coming up now before we move on to the next layer of this, the gift?
I found it really interesting how you said about him having a meltdown in the supermarket about a magazine, because like I find that one of the most difficult things, because my ex-partner buys like my children lots of stuff. So when I go out and I can't physically afford to buy all that stuff, they're like, Mummy's not as fun. Mummy's, and I'm trying to instill into my children that like experiences are fun, and going out in nature is fun, and not toys and magazines, and they're going to want them, aren't they? But to an extent where not every time you go to the supermarket, because I can't afford it. So that's been such a big like battle for me in our parenting differences. The difference in like, it sounds really sad and not that great, but like monetary value of stuff, like to me now, that's completely changed. My life has been turned upside down. I no longer have that to fall back on, whereas he's just in exactly the same position as he was, if not better off, because he now doesn't have to, feed another mouth, which was me. So yeah, it's been a big like challenge for me, that the whole monetary side of things.
It's brutal, the finances of being a solo parent, isn't it? A single parent. Like like I said, I am in a privileged position, and I've got a steady job in the NHS. But like the cost of childcare and paying the mortgage and everything on my own has just been crazy. I've just basically rinsed every bit of savings I ever had and been living off credit card, because until like he's just coming into the patch of time where he's going to get some free hours, and that's going to be so different because it's really hard in that time where you've got to pay for childcare to go to work.
Yeah, it annoys me this because there's money there, there is money there. And I know recently you don't have to wait till 2 now. I think if you're working now, you can get up to 30 hours before 2. I think it's from 8 months old. But yeah, it's challenging, really, really challenging. Jackie, anything else coming up for you before we move on to the gifts?
I guess one thing we haven't sort of said anything about is the knock-on effect on the children as well. But I guess that would be something different to discuss. We're talking about the mums here, but that is something that occurred to me. The upset that you have to deal with of your children.
What did it look like for you, Jackie? What did it look like that for you and your son?
Well, I guess I tried. That was one of the things I tried to avoid happening. But whatever you do, they're absent. So I think it leaves a hole in their life, really, to have an absent father. And I think it can lead to low self-esteem, feeling rejected, and issues that can be created within your child later on that will affect them in their life, things they may have to deal with later on. So
do you think it's interesting, that point, because I think about this quite a bit. Like Frank will do these things where if Dan comes to pick him up, he'll like want to go and show him his bedroom, or he'll get a toy out, or he'll show him something. And I'm thinking, is that coming from this conditional love where he thinks he's got to be a certain way or offer something shiny to his dad? Or is he just engaging with him? Like it's hard to read, isn't it? And how he seems to, like Dan will say, oh, he's never like that with me, because often, occasionally, sorry, we'll do things together and Frank will have his tantrums like a normal child, and Dan will say he doesn't do that with me. So is he suppressing his emotions as well because he doesn't feel like he can be his full self there? So I do have these questions about self-esteem, about how they mold themselves, like because it's conditional on one side, and then from us, they've come from us, like we're the Stargate, and I think because I'm so open and honest with him, especially when I've had meltdowns, and I do so much of the repair and explaining and, our situation and stuff, and apologize for behavior, and, like I feel like he's got that permission to really be his full self with me. So I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking deeper into it than I should, but it's interesting that you talk about that. It's important to think about, isn't it?
There's no real yardstick with your first child, that's for sure. Maybe second, third child, you maybe see differences in behaviour, but you don't have a yardstick, do you really? So yeah, like you say, it's hard to judge. Something that did spring to mind to me again was something else that I had issue with, and it goes back to society again. And while we're on this side of the coin, so to speak, but the fact that I do believe that every mother has the right to be at home and give full attention to their child for those first formative 5 years of that child's life, if that's what you choose to do. I think it's every mother's right to have that time. But what I find curious is that if you go to work and somebody comes to look after your children and you pay that person to look after your kids, then they're doing a valuable job. However, if you're at home, it's not considered that you're working. You're doing exactly the same job. In fact, you're doing more of a job. You're at home looking after your children, but that supposedly that's not good enough. And the only thing that I can put that down to is no value in you looking after your own children, but you can be on a massive wage to look after someone else's kids, and that's because they're paying tax and you're not. And that's what I think that comes down to. right? And that's innate in society.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, Jackie.
paradox
I was trying to make this point before, Alex, about money, and my point was that, they do give money to these carers. Like, we should have the option as mothers, if we want to raise our own children at home, we should be able to get paid to be our own kids' carers. That was the point I was getting to before. So thanks, Jackie. And you're right. You are so right.
and that really annoys me because it devalues the role of mother. And
True, it's true, and it's so infuriating, isn't it? And yeah, I highly recommend you to look into Andrea O'Reilly, because she's trying to speak prominently about this. And another woman is Rian Eisler. She wrote the book Nurturing Our Humanity, and she talks about partnerism as a societal model instead of like domination, hierarchical model of society. And in partnerist societies, which are like Scandinavian countries, there's this idea of valuing care in the home and supporting the people that are doing those roles, not just mothers either, but people who are caring for the sick and the elderly, as their family members inside the home. And there's a lot of emotional toll and stress in being a carer, right? We think we've got these support networks now for people who are doing care for people who are terminally ill, for example. So there's all these support networks, but it was still not, like you say, it was still not valuing mother work and the constant absorption of the stress. Like even Gabor Mate, in his most recent book, talks about how mums are the people who are most likely to get anti-inflammatory diseases because they're the ones that absorb all the stress. Like there's no one mothering the mother anymore. There's no tribe, there's no community. So the mother's just absorbing it all, doing it all. And I think now we stand at like a time where mums have never had so much responsibility, because now we've got to think about the ecological crisis as well in our mothering, and this more conscious values, and being more aware of our kids, like all this parenting. Like a friend came to stay the other day and she had a book in a bag called Exceptional Parenting. So there's so much more information, so much more to think about and do. So I think it's just so intense. Yeah, more than any other epoch, I think, of mothering. So it is rubbish. So these people, Rian Iceland, Nurturing Our Humanity, is arguing for partnerism. And she's an amazing woman in her 90s, been on a mad journey, and she's got this website and she's trying to develop these 4 cornerstones. And one of them literally is looking at the gross domestic product. So they've done this equation with researchers in Australia that looks at the gross domestic product, which is economy, how much wealth is in the economy and what makes that wealth. So cigarettes, for example, have tax, so we make money, but then people get ill off cigarettes and cost money. So that's how they work it out. And if you put in, I don't know how they've done it with their equations, but if you put in care in the home into the gross domestic product, so the care that women do, mothers do in the home, looking after the next generation that become the next workforce, it actually accounts for 50% of the gross domestic product. 50%. So if if you could look, what she's arguing is that's what we need to do. We need to appreciate that this mother work is going on in a monetized society, and the fact that we're not monetizing it, we're not, investing in it, it's having these serious ramifications. So there are these voices out there. So I encourage you to read Andrea O'Reilly, Matrescence Feminism, and Rian Iceland, Nurturing Our Humanity, and definitely check out their works if you're interested in this, like campaigning to pay mums for mum work, or at least give them the choice to use the money that's allocated on the children's education, to pay themselves for doing that work at home. And I think that'd be better for the kids as well, right? In some situations.
One thing is as well about like there's all that mothering work, all the parenting work that's shared as well. But when you're a single parent, solo parent, running a house as well, there's just like everything else you've got to do on top of just being the parent as well. Being that emotional holder, being the person who does all the parenting, all the meals, all the stuff that you think of, but then also, making the car go on the road, or like fixing the fridge, or the scooter's broken, who's going to put the wheel back on? Just stuff like that, like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, my list of DIY is ridiculous.
Yeah.
having to pay someone to come in and do little jobs, or like my dad came over and it took months because they're busy, he's in another county, they've got their own lives, and but he came to fix my wardrobe, but I had no wardrobe doors on for a year, because there's only so much you can do yourself. And I did try and do it myself, but it's got 2 doors, so I needed 4 hands. So I had to wait a year for the fingers to align to get someone to help me fix my wardrobe. What do you think we uniquely receive in these situations compared to, imagined other mothering situations? What's the gold in this? What's been the gold in it for you?
I would be really interested to hear from you, Jackie, because I guess it's so early days, like sort of for me and Ord in our experience of having a really special bond, like I would say, like that feels, I don't know, and imagine other, like he does come to me for everything. And that's the struggle, but it's also like an amazing gift too, like he really loves his mummy. So I kind of would be interested in like how, to know how that pans out when there isn't a really significant other parent around. Yeah. And I guess another gift I do feel like, especially hearing from, you, Bo, and you, Amber, like the struggle of like not having like the emotional labor of a relationship actually sometimes feels a real gift. Like there's like a part of life that's sort of missing there, but actually, I don't know, maybe in these early years, or I don't know, just it feels like sometimes not having that extra thing going on is like a gift of my position.
Yeah. Even some nuclear parent family mums, I'm going to do a episode for nuclear parent family mums to speak, but some of them will say it's like having another kid and really annoying because it's grown up there and they're just not helpful, unempathetic, and actually cause more problems, can be an emotional drain even. So it's interesting, isn't it? We all have our crosses to bear in different shapes and sizes. Anyone else? Gifts. What's the gold in this for you?
I
Well,
found that I'm able to parent how I want to. And like that has been the most beautiful thing. Like I can parent exactly how I want to, when I want to. I can take my children where I want to take them without having to ask anyone. And I think also the biggest gift has been that my children are going to see that women can do this. And yeah, it's been more empowering for me. And also I get a bit of time as well, like unlike Jackie and Alex, like I get a little bit of time to myself. So like now they're at the dad's and I'm working all week. Bear in mind I work my ass off. Like I pretty much don't get to sit down during this week, but it is my time to create the life that I want to create for my children. So yeah, there's lots of silver linings for me in this, and I'm forever grateful that I do have him there to let me be able to have that too. And I suppose he does occasionally come and help me with DIY, so I'm quite lucky in that sense. I'm like, help! How do I put a light bulb in? I don't even know. And he's like, ugh. But there you are.
Thanks, Amber. I really appreciate that. I'm relating with you as well. Like the space, I think, is a gift. Sometimes he'll go, and what you said before, Jackie, about emptiness syndrome, that just, triggered a bit there because he goes sometimes, and I've got this list of things to do, and then I'll close the door when he's gone, and I turn around and I like sometimes just fall into myself because there's no purpose. It's like there's no purpose. So sometimes I am a bit frozen by it. But then, there's so much space and to be able to rest and not have that constant mum, 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 mum. Like just having a bit of peace in my head to be able to sit and just concentrate on something for an extended period of time, is beautiful. And I think I've learned so much about myself, like humbling myself over and over the way it's brought up so many pieces of new work for me to do on my own personal development. Like, like I'm learning so much through being in this, like a pressure cooker. Sometimes it feels like I'm learning a lot about love. It's really enhancing my spiritual practice, and because I have to be so disciplined to keep myself in check, but because I'm showing up for him, wanting to do it for him, like it's really amazing. I think he's been my greatest teacher, but having to start again in a new town, and really make us have friends and connect into community and stuff like that. Like the gift in it for me has been how it's made me go out in the world and made me build new things. And, even this, like this podcast, like my situation, if it had been different, I wouldn't be doing this. And this feels like an amazing portal, like being able to write about how it was. Even lockdown, like the gift of lockdown, that acute isolation really forced me into this trauma of evolution in my matrescence. And now, as I'm grounding on the other side, I've just got all this passion to create, social justice. And just this podcast is like layer one of this mission. So, yeah, there's so much in it, like when we go through hardships, so much in it. So yeah, humbling, the strength, mother's endurance. Never felt such strength. Like I will carry him and don't drop him. But yeah, if you pass me a bag of shopping that weighs half of what he does, I keep needing to stop to have a rest. Just that sense of you can just carry on, carry him up a mountain. If they're sick and they can't go anymore, and you're sick and you can't go anymore, if you need to get there, you'll carry him, and it just comes from somewhere. Like this to keep going and keep going. That's been an absolutely profound phenomena that I've seen and want to work with more closely, to apply in my own life where I procrastinate a bit, or I could be a bit stronger with regards to discipline, or making better choices. Yeah, just should funnel some of that mother's endurance into my own mothering myself, shouldn't I? But yeah, loads of gifts, amazing. What about you, Jackie?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any bigger bond than there is between a mother and child. I think it's massive. And for me, I think found a massive amount of internal strength, like you're saying. You've got to get there, you've got to get there. And there is no giving up, and there is no way that you're not doing it. It's as simple as that, really. Well, it was for me anyway. I wanted to be a mother. I chose to be a mother. I love being a mother. And that bond's massive. And I think because I did so much of it on my own, I think the bond is huge. And I did do what I wanted to do, really, in the end, because and I didn't have anyone stopping me. So I took my son out of school when he was 9 years old, and I took him on a world travel trip for 8 months. And we started off on the beach in Thailand, and then we went up to northern Thailand, went overland, then through Laos and Cambodia. And then we went back into Thailand, and we flew to India, and we went to Rajasthan, Pushkar, Delhi, Calcutta. Went up to McLeod-Ganj and spent 6 weeks where the Dalai Lama lives, in the Tibetan community up there. He had his 10th birthday there. I think it's 3 days after the Dalai Lama's birthday. So we celebrated the Dalai Lama's birthday, and then we celebrated my son's birthday. And I bought him a book, and it was one of the Dalai Lama's books, and it's a biography. It was one of his biography that he'd written. So that was one of his presents that I bought. And I really loved buying Christmas and birthday presents abroad. It was great going shopping and buying all these wonderful different gifts. So I bought him this book, and he was sat on this chair, and he opened the book, and he just held the book in his hand, and he looked at me and he said, "This man has changed my life." It absolutely blew me away. I could not believe how wise he sounded in the words, just those simple words. This man's changed my life. And I've just realised what a profound effect it had on him to be around all these Buddhist people. And he got into collecting semi-precious stones. And then we went up to Kashmir and then back to Thailand and back to England. So we were away for 8 months. And I took him out of school. I timed it right so that it was the second to last year of primary school. So he came back. When I took him out of school, I said, I'm taking him away for a holiday for a month. And then we stayed away for 8 months. But while we were away, he kept a diary, he kept a scrapbook, he learnt a different language. His mathematics was better because he had to convert all these currencies. I got him to draw maps of where we started and where we'd been and what we'd seen en route. And it was a real bonding process for both of us. It was a magical, once in a lifetime trip. And that's the magic for me. And I have an amazing relationship with my son. Yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of
That is
massive.
my dream, Jackie.
Well, follow your heart. That's what I say. Follow your heart.
Yeah.
And if you've got,
he'd learn so much more.
No, it was so made him so worldly wise, and he was more, at school they just reiterate the same thing year in. No wonder the kids get bored at school. The learning from that experience was, massive. You can't do that in the schoolroom. I would recommend anyone to do it. And if you've got to tell a little whitey, go for it.
How did you find doing that on your own?
You know what? Everybody in the world looks after you when you're with a child. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Made a lot of amazing friends, people that I'm still in touch with now, 20 years later. People in India that I still could keep in touch with, people in Thailand that like a second family in Thailand, and people that he's seen again as he's grown up. And, it's just opening doors into a bigger world. There's more going on out there than there is just on this little poxy island that we live on. So, yeah.
Don't you find when you go traveling, you come back to England and you're like, nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed.
Why is everything the same?
That's the follow your heart. That's what I say. And it's not that, maybe not that easy to do. But I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew where I was going when I set off, but I didn't know what the plan was really. And that for some reason, the universe throws at you what you need if you just hope, if you open your arms to it. So, yeah, I feel blessed to have had that time. I really do.
And how amazing for him, to be just on that cusp of puberty, and experiencing such rich cultures that are so different to where he's come from. It's a revelation, I think, for people that are trapped in Western individualistic patriarchal mindset. It's a real revelation that the rest of the world doesn't operate like that. Actually, you can choose compassion. Actually, you can choose equanimity. Actually, you can choose to be a bit more communal. You can choose to look after people. You can choose to be happy and say good morning to people on the street. You can share. You don't have to be so defensive, like someone's trying to attack you all the time in competition, and the stigmas as well. Like we went to Egypt in January and I didn't feel stigmatized at all. Like what you've just said, Jackie, I felt helped more than I do on my own home country. I felt helped, and I didn't feel vulnerable. And even though we're in a complex, like the staff, they were helpful because they could see her on my own, so they would naturally like try and entertain him a bit or check in. So I felt really tended as a single mum, and I can't wait to take Franco traveling. I know like he has to be a bit older than he is to go backpacking, but yeah, just getting the Lonely Planet. Like getting him on chicken buses, taking him. I've got this vision. We're in this like boat, just rocking in the bayou, with the mangroves and the light. And I say to him, I've had this vision for so long, and here we are now in it. Just to acculturate them to the world, to get them out of the lie, the fakery, the control, the domination of this country that we live in. But then likewise, you know, we've got the NHS, haven't we? We've got other things here that they haven't got in other cultures. So
I don't think we've got an NHS anymore, I'm afraid. But yeah, that's another issue, isn't it?
And benefit system as well. You know, I've seen mums with babies sleeping rough on cardboard, you know, in Madagascar, and that was a culture shock for me when I first saw that.
Yeah,
How much homelessness there is, and you know, people that are ill, like, you know, blind man playing a flute with one leg, you know, on the street, you know, that doesn't happen here in most cases. You know, the system's in place, so we're grateful for that, aren't we? But come on, we want paying for our mother work, and we want to decide what we do with our own children with regards to their education. We want that option for ourselves, thank you. And yeah, less stigma, more deeper understanding of the work we do when we're doing it on our own, whether it's 100% of the time, 75% of the time, 50% of the time. It's intense to be in a house on your own with a kid with so many demands and nobody else to absorb it. It's really, really challenging, isn't it?
Well,
So
it's
yeah,
very,
more
very
understanding.
lonely due to lack of when they're young, especially if you're on your own and depending on, you know, who lives around you. But you know, there's a lot of nights where they're in bed, aren't they? They're in bed at 7, maybe if you're lucky, anyway. You've got no adult company. You've got no, you know, nobody to fire off. I mean, we're more lucky now. We've got, you know, you can just get on a Zoom call with your mates, can't you? And whatever. You know, talk to people all over the world. It's great, and you just feel like they're there with you. But yeah, there was not so much of that when you know, 30 years ago. It was all a bit new. But also, like, if you're trying to work as a lone parent, single parent, or otherwise, and you're trying to work and make a living, do all that supportive financial thing, then you're not available to your children as much as you might want to be as well. So, you know, I found myself doing all this research work, you know, and my dad would give me this Apple Mac computer, and I'm like, right, I need to find out how to use this thing. And, you know, but you're not, while you're doing all that and studying, researching, or whatever it is you're doing, you're not available to them. Or you're not available to the work because you're 100% available to them. It's really difficult to juggle it all, is what I find. Just juggle your time, juggle your energy, try and, you know, fulfill all needs that are required, including your own. It's tricky. Yeah.
That's the revelation I got to in my research, that this cliche, you know, that it takes a village to raise a child isn't the whole picture. Actually, in actual fact, it takes a village to raise a mother. And that's organically, I feel, the way nature is meant it to be. You know, very rare that mammals raise their children on their own. You know, it's mostly in community, isn't it? So yeah, more of that. How do we do that? You know, my next is to think about how I can make more spaces for them mums to come together. Because if they can meet each other and bond, then have that deep trust where they can have the safe space to share, then it just fulfills so much of a need in society. But because we've only got these secular, very superficial, you know, environments for mum and toddler groups at the moment, that, you know, there's a few coming in the background, isn't there? There's a few, but the majority is very secular and not mother centered, child centered. So, you know, my work is, how can I do that? How can I create them spaces? And so it's really amazing, you know, to have this opportunity. And
This is one of those spaces because there's no kids present. They're all wherever they need to be, looked after, cared, you know, warm, snuggly, whatever. And this is mum time. So, you know, and you could have you know, you could do more of this, as much more of this as you know. And you know, I feel that there's 2 people here I've met before, and I feel like I feel really connected to all of you now after this, you know, because we're all living we're all on a similar ride, aren't we? We're on the same boat, bobbing up and down on the waves, just trying to make a go of it. So
I wonder if that's all part of breaking out of that kind of heteronormative thing, isn't it? The idea that the nuclear family meets all your needs, and that you would, have your needs met by the other person in the house and stuff. And I do feel like perhaps, I don't know, maybe because I've accessed it, but like being a single mum by choice, there is quite a lot of like online groups and support. Like when I had Ord, like I got in a WhatsApp group with like 7 other solo mums who we've all had our kids around a really similar time and all live across the UK, but just like really will use that as a space where we like share like, you know, our events and like what's going on and the realities of it all and stuff. And that's been good, but I wonder if that's part of like having a kind of almost pre-existing group that I knew, you know, like because it's a category or something, I knew I could lean into it, if that makes sense.
The vision is to have regular live meetups and then work in breakout rooms, you know, even to come together and do a bit of crafting. Or like, it's interesting you say, Amber, you want to host online yoga stuff. I used to do deep rest parties because when my son was 2, I did restorative yoga teacher training, and that was completely revolutionary for me in my crisis. Like, it just amazing. It stopped me bashing myself because I was nurturing my nervous system. I specifically worked with restorative yoga, and I felt that was so nurturing because I was doing a lot of therapy, a bit like yourself, Alex. You know, a lot of it was very cathartic, and I was in a very intense situation, but then I wasn't really resting. You know, so the restorative yoga worked deeply to heal my nervous system. There was no pushing, no, because also strenuous yoga, like when you're absolutely exhausted, was a thing that was a barrier for me. So the restorative yoga, because it started to, yeah, it started to heal my nervous system. It put me in touch with the inner nurturer, and I think that was really pivotal for me. So and so because I loved it so much, I started to do deep rest parties. So every Wednesday I'd come online, you know, and people would come and I'd lead a restorative yoga class, and it was great. You know, there was one woman who had a baby, so sometimes she'd come on and do what she could, you know, because she was breastfeeding. Um, but yeah, she got a lot out of it, and so I really encourage you to do that. And for all the listeners who are wanting to connect more, you know, hear me say that it's in the pipeline. I'm going to arrange these regular motherhood raw but true sharing circles where we'll come online, be led in some sort of practice, either creative or meditative, and then that'll create a sharing space where we're going to breakout rooms and just do some core listening. You know, we can have this space to be heard and witnessed, and then keep going, because women's circles are great for spiritual women. But what my research also showed is when women, them same spiritual women, become mothers, they can't take the kids to the women's groups because the women have to censor themselves. Some women's groups are welcoming of children and they can pass the baby around and stuff like that, but it's not the same as when you go to that space on your own and you can deeply work with it. So that's why I developed the village, which was part women's group, part mum and toddler group. So it was mother centered first. And as I model this at the festivals this year, I'm also going to have furry godmothers to work with the kids, tell them stories and be dressed in a furry costume, you know, while the mums do the relaxing. And then I've got loads of plans of an app, you know, with resources on and a little map that connects women who can come together almost like a spiritual mum seeks other spiritual single mum friend kind of thing, you know, and connect that way, but not monetize it, because there is a single mum app now where you can put a profile up and say what you're interested in. But I think we can go a bit further and align it with values, and then have this map where people can arrange to meet each other. And you know, there's all these things in the pipeline. It's like the mycelium mother mushroom. It's just like all these threads, because it's a newly emerging thing. Like matrescence, this word, it's a newly emerging thing. So there's a lot of space now where we can fill, because it's becoming like in our awareness as a humanity, like we need to look at it. So matricentric feminism is a thing, and then understanding matrescence, like, wow, we know so much about moving from adolescence to adult, but we know nothing about going from woman to mother. Like, what are we doing? We're really letting the women down. So there's this space now for us to go for it. So it's a really exciting time, a great time. The universe is ready for it. It's the balancing of the collective, isn't it? Like, end of patriarchy. Let's sort the mums out, balance the collective, and then raise some really healthy next generations. Wow, what an absolute journey. As usual, motherhood rawful but true just keeps giving. I'm so grateful to every single one of you for coming on and sharing and being rawful but true, and just really honouring all you listeners and your stories. And Yeah, just pledging again. This is your space. It's for you. Come on, send me a DM. I want to do this series of special case studies. And we're also going to look at motherhood and menstruation. But that's us over time, over 2 hours. Could go on all night. Any final thoughts? Well, practice resurrection. That's what I always say. Let go of guilt and shame and practice resurrection. What we're trying to do in this culture is like a plant trying to grow without sunlight. So give yourself a break. Let go of guilt and shame fast. It's not your fault. It's culture. And you're doing a really good job. The kids are going to be all right. So, thank you so much. I've been Rainbow. We've had Jackie, Amber and Alex. And we've been Raw but True. Good you.